Okay, good evening, everyone. Welcome. Thank you so much for coming. I counted a moment ago, we're over 25 people, so we'll see if anyone else trickles in, but that's pretty good. I presume you all know tonight it's sort of a kickoff public engagement meeting about something called an LWRP, which stands for Local Waterfront Revitalization Program. It's a New York State program, and we're going to explain in more depth what it is. But it's a planning document. I'm sure some of you saw on the website or in an email the link to the 65-page draft document. I know some of you even read it, which is great. So that's just a draft. So for the next 6 to 8 months, that draft is going to get reworked, added to, kicked, sent back to the Department of State. They review it. They send it back to us with comments, back and forth. So tonight is sort of the first in the beginning of a process with that. It's a planning document. Tivoli has one. It's so old that we were discussing tonight whether it was from 1991 or 93, but it was a long time ago. And sometime around 2016, the Department of State, they keep track of these things, and they got in touch with me when I was a brand new mayor and said, hey, your LWRP is getting a little old. Maybe you should apply for some funding and get an update. So we got a $50,000 grant before the pandemic, 2017, 18, something like that. We got started. We formed a great committee, and we are joined by Sam Hunt, who's on our LWRP committee, and Sarah M. Bowden, who's actually the chair, and Dan Hubble, who can't be here tonight. So it's a small, agile, very hard-working, heavy-lifting group, and the village has also been working with village planner Michelle Gregg on this to get us to where we are, to get us to that draft. And we've been doing this with Ty & Bond, who is the same engineering firm who helped us do our water system improvements, the water tower. If anyone was here the last Tuesday and Thursday for some of those drainage meetings, that's also Ty & Bond, so they're a very great firm, and they helped us win that grant so we could update our LWRP. Tonight, I'm going to hand it over to Sarah in a minute. She's going to tell you more about what an LWRP is, what's in the draft, in case you didn't get a chance to read it through it. And then after some more information, we're going to break out into groups, and that's what this sheet is about. It's required by the state, but of course, as you know, in Tivoli, we do this anyway, to hear from the residents, right? So I'm glad we have a good crowd tonight. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Sarah. I'm sure I forgot lots of things, but I'll speak up when I remember them. So, Sarah, go ahead.
Thanks, Joel. No, you didn't forget anything, I don't think. So hey, everybody. I know many of you and some of you, I think I'm a new face. So I'll just say I moved to the village in 2020. I've lived in the area since about 2008 and love Tivoli, and only am a fairly recent resident. I used to be on the town council, I have a background in public policy, I work at BARD. That's just a couple of things for you in case you're worried about my ability to but when Joel mentioned that they were trying to reboot the LWRP process after starting it pre-pandemic, and then like many things, it kind of got put on hold while everybody was like, what's going on with lockdown? I was really thrilled to join it because I just love a process that includes a lot of community involvement and that really takes everything from the bird's eye view about a community right down to like the nitty-gritty details, and that's why the document is so long. And the document that you see in the website is really only a partial. If you look at the table of contents, I've printed it out so I could remind myself, but there will eventually be 7 sections. 7 sections plus a whole appendices section with A through J. So that's a lot of sections, and we're only really talking about section 1 tonight, besides the maps, which you may have seen on the big draft. We've got a couple of them printed here, just the zoning map, and then I have some smaller ones when we do the breakout session. So before I get into what the draft is, I just wanted to lay out for you what the agenda is tonight. We're introducing what an LWRP is. And Sam and I will just talk you through a little bit of what the draft is, what we've been working on. Hey, everybody, if you sign in the back, as Joel said, this is a state-funded process, and it's also, or a grant-funded process, and it's also run by the state. And part of what we're gonna have to submit when we submit this whole thing in 6 to 8 months is evidence that we brought the community in. So that's why we wanted to sign in to show that we have the numbers, besides that, we're so glad that you're here. Okay, so what we're gonna do is go over the draft a little bit, really briefly, maybe 10, 15 minutes at tops. And then we're gonna break out into small groups and basically just talk about what our ideas are for the plan. So if you look on the document that you got when you came in, and if you didn't get one, feel free to grab one or grab one later. In the back, there's sort of 4 guiding questions. We'll have each group have sort of a scribe, somebody who's going to take notes for the group, but feel free to take your own notes. But we want the official notes of the group to come back, so don't like put your social security number on there, or put something on it that you can't lose. Yeah, so we're hoping to make that kind of most of the meeting, like at least 30 minutes, and then we'll come back together and discuss briefly some themes, and then we'll adjourn for tonight. And really the rest of this process is going to be public feedback, back and forth, more information gathering. So it's not the end of the process for public comment, it's the beginning. And it's not a public hearing, it's not formal, it's really like a time where you can really say kind of whatever you want. It's a brainstorming session. No ideas are wrong, no questions are dumb. Okay, so I'm gonna go over this agenda, this outline of the LWRP real quick. And Sam, do you want to come up and join me? Okay, so like Joel said, we're a small but mighty group. Sorry that Dan couldn't be here. He's got a background in law and land use, and I'm not sure what else. So he's very smart, and a lot of this stuff, if you read it, if it feels like a little bit like technical and precise, it's either Michelle or Dan. Michelle did a lot of the work on the writing also. But I want to turn it over to Sam to talk about some of the pieces. She was mainly coordinating, especially the community profile and the historical stuff.
Okay, so just a very quick overview of these 2 sections. They're larger sections because it's kind of where we are able to present ourselves as a community. And I'm not gonna talk a lot about them. I'm really just gonna tell you quickly what's in there. If you do get around to reading the LWRP, I think you'll be surprised. It's really, like, the first time that I read the whole document together, I actually got tears in my eyes. I was like, I was so proud that we had built it, and also just proud of Tivoli.
If I could jump in right here. Everything we're talking about is on the village website. If you go to government, drop-down menu, you'll see LWRP. Click on that, and you'll see the draft and all the maps and the appendices and stuff.
But I also totally understand if you don't have time to read 65-page document. And so here's a little cheat sheet of 2 sections. The community profile really just starts with a description of our physical location, just situating us on the banks of the Hudson, sandwiched between the roads that we're sandwiched between. It gives an overview of what is beloved about Tivoli, specifically our gorgeous topography, and how so much of that topography really is crucial to our historical development. What the river has meant, what the agriculture surrounding us has meant to our development, including the abundance of waterways that we have in the village. It gets into a little bit of pre-colonial history. The community profile in one way is like a little taste of what comes later too. It's really just like a bite-sized part of the LWRP. It gets into the history of the steamboats, the rail lines. It breaks down the difference between Tivoli Landing from Madeline proper, where we are right now, right? And the landing as being the riverfront area. It moves into the future, thinking about the major residential developments that have happened, including Tivoli Gardens, Tivoli Acres, Provost Park. And then it briefly explains our role as both what we're doing now as a natural hub for nature and also a hub for culture, as well as a business center. And so that's just a quick community profile. The one other section that I want to introduce you tonight too is the historical development section, which is a bit longer. The major change, I would say, between the 1991 version and this version is that I wanted to make sure I included pre-colonial history. That was not even present on, and there's so much pre-colonial history here in Tivoli. And so it tries to get into that without revealing certain sites because we have had looting problems in the past. It then traces European and African settlement in Tivoli and early development. So we look at the history of industry, what the mills meant to our village. I go through the different cemeteries, including the smallpox cemetery, the African American burial grounds there, the graves down at the landing here, the Hoffman graves that are there, and even it gets a little bit into DePeyster's Pet Cemetery. So you're reading, it's not, there's moments of the document that are really joyful like that. It gets into the history of the churches and kind of looking at Tivoli as a history that we can view through these churches. It gets into Pierre de la Barge, the swindler. We have how Tivoli was a fantasy, and how tellingly the only street of his that remains is Friendship Street. It gets into James Stark Clark as an educator and a minister, and Tivoli's first health commissioner. Yes, we had a health commissioner. Dr. Smith Boughton, who was a farm and labor organizer in the area. John Watts DePeyster, of course, with the Leeks and Watts Orphan Home, and kind of brings us a little more up to date with Eleanor Roosevelt. And so that's a real quick overview of the historical document.
Great. Great. So that is a great. It's if you haven't read it yet, at least read those sections. Just do a little word search and just go to those spots because you will learn something and you will be tickled, and it's so beautiful. So part of why an LWRP has all that stuff, which isn't normally in something that you might think of as a comprehensive plan, doesn't always go so deep into history, but what we're trying to really do is really set the scene for what the area is we're talking about and why it's important to then talk about certain things about land use and natural resources, and basically the rest of the document is all about what are our values as a community around how we use our land. Something that's interesting about Tivoli's LWRP, so Red Hook just did theirs. They also have an LWRP, they also have river frontage, but their section of town for the LWRP is the section of town that's near the river, right? So it's not a comprehensive look at Red Hook. Our LWRP covers the entire village. Our whole village is in it. So what it means is that we're not really here tonight to talk only about the river or even specifically about the river. We can totally talk about it, and there are plenty of spots in here that talk about the riverfront park and the plans for that and the history of that whole process, and about climate change and erosion and all that stuff that's specific to the river. But a lot of the document is really more about, if you look through, it's about, for this map, this is the zoning map, so what are our existing land uses? How do we use our land here? There's other maps that talk about the floodplains and and erosion and wetlands and natural resources like habitat and connectivity and all kinds of stuff. There's the one I printed out tonight is trails. So there's all kinds of soils. There's all kinds of cool stuff that goes into this plan. And so if you look at the table of contents for the rest of the section 1, it really goes through all those different areas. So we have land use, zoning districts. We talk about all the natural resources. It's very detailed. So if you wanted to know what kinds of fish are near Tivoli, you can find out. Or other bugs and wildlife, and it's pretty detailed actually. Talked a lot about climate change, which I was really happy to see. So there's a lot of updates from 1990s, right? I don't think the 90s one mentioned climate change at all. The other cool thing I thought, looking at the 1990s one, so the two main focuses were, I think, do you remember? I think one was for sure about the grave concern about the business district. That it was
revitalize the downtown.
Revitalizing the downtown was the main focus, right?
Yeah.
So I think we all feel we can check that box, right? It's not that we don't have notes, right, or like ideas for the future, but I don't think anybody's gonna say that we need to like juice that area up. We're good. So certainly there's plenty to reflect on about what we do with the downtown, but it's really interesting to think about, you know, in 30 years or so, like how things have changed. So then the rest of the document really talks about so what we do use the river for, and scenic resources, visual quality in the village. We name like some of our scenic roads, and then we talk a lot about the public services and facilities, which obviously has been a huge topic in the village in the last 10, at least 10 years, right? And actually, I was just looking today and making a note that we don't say like exactly when we moved the tower, so we say like when it started, thinking about it, so we need to still make some changes there, but yeah, so that is the basic document, and basically, if you haven't read it yet, you can still read it. It's going to be there for a long time. I wanted Joel to talk about an anecdote about why this kind of plan is important, just to give you a sense of why isn't LWRP important. It will come up a lot if you look at like planning. Raise your hand if you've been to a planning board meeting ever. Yeah, so sometimes in a planning board process, they have to go through, LWRP is one of the things they've got to check off as having reviewed in relation to whatever plan they're looking at.
Right, so now that we're learning more about what an LWRP is, what does it do, how does it benefit us, why are we here on this beautiful evening? There's sort of two big things. One is everything the village board does, the planning board, our zoning, you know, every time we write a law, it has to go through something called LWRP consistency, where we check it against what this community said were our values, were our goals. And that's so it's a way to, it's important we sort of get this right and get everything in it, because this is what's going to sort of steer the village in the coming years, as we were steered by what was written in '91. The other thing is it has some protective capability for the village. You all recall how Amtrak was going to do some gating and fencing up and down this corridor here. Tivoli, I got a call from the Department of State because we're an LWRP community, and they went down that list and they called every municipality that has an LWRP and said, hey, Amtrak's coming forward with this fencing and gating plan, and you probably want to know about it. Communities that did not have an LWRP in the area did not get that phone call, and including Germantown, who they may have finished theirs, but they went right out and got a grant, and they got their committee together, and so it's something we reference when the anchorages were going to go in the Hudson a couple years ago. So it gives us some oomph as a small community in the eyes of the state against some of the bigger entities who may want things for our area that we don't want.
And even just like if we want to go for a grant, say to do a sidewalk or a path down to the river at some point, one of the things that would really help would be an LWRP plan where we state very clearly many times, you'll already see it, and we will do it more, I'm sure, once we get public comment. This is something we really want. It's a very high priority. This is why. This is how much people use it. You know, this is what people are really valuing. So this is your opportunity in the next 6 months to say, either yes, we want fencing around the railroad tracks, or no, that's not a community value, that kind of thing, right? Yes, we want all the streets on or houses on Montgomery Street to be purple. No, we don't. You know, like, what's our community character? What are our values? So you'll see the guiding questions on the back of this sheet here. Kind of walks you through just some pretty open-ended questions about what you love and value, what's missing, what needs work, hopes for the future, some concerns, and you don't have to limit yourself to one project. I just put one because I don't want you to feel pressure. But yeah, so that's the basic thing that we want to do tonight. Does anybody have a question about the process? Not like specific to the document, like a line edit, but like the process of the purpose.
Is the word going to go out so that people can answer these questions online too?
Yeah, so what I was thinking is I was just talking to Paula Spoonmaker. Many of you may know she chaired the Red Hook LWRP. They just finished. They had to do theirs mostly during lockdown. And one of the tools they used that I thought was really cool is they used like an online form to collect submissions. So I'm thinking we might come up with one of those. Again, with basically the same questions. We might tweak them a little bit depending on your feedback, but and use that to kind of collect more information as we go in this process. So something like that, and then if we can like share it with neighbors and like on the email listserv and Facebook, yeah.
And if you have a burning idea in the middle of the night tonight, before we have that set up, you can just email the mayor and just put LWRP in the subject line, and we'll gather them all up, and I'll hand them over to Sarah.
The other thing we're going to do, we should mention, so we're required to have 3 meetings. So this is the first one, it's just the kickoff. We hope to have the second one probably at the end of the summer, September, sometime around in there. Once we've had a chance to collect a lot of feedback, we'll make like a new draft with a new section for like basically future projects. Almost like a strengths weaknesses analysis sort of. And then we'll bring that back, we'll all meet about it again, and then we'll have one final meeting kind of putting our thumbs up on the draft, which hopefully would be like end of the year, January, sometime around in there.
And I'll just throw out the other big goal that was in the early 90s, LWRP, was the village should get some access to the Hudson River.
That's right.
So,
Yeah.
along with revitalizing the downtown, those are 2 goals that this community articulated back then and accomplished. And I'm looking at Kathy because she's been on that committee since. So it's a forward-looking document, backward and forward.
Yeah, so it's like fun to think of like what in 30 years, what are we hopefully gonna look back on and say, oh, good, like mission accomplished, we did those 2 things, and this is kind of where we get those ideas to come forward.
So any questions on anything
So
so far?
in breaking out, and you're saying you want one person to be,
Yeah, so I think
so everyone doesn't fill out her own,
you can if you want to. So I made it so that you could just fill out your own for short. But we have blank paper and pens, and the thought is if you basically will probably just break it into roughly equal groups. And maybe try to break yourselves up a little bit from your best friends if they're all in the room. And that way we hear different perspectives. And I think part of the idea is then we're hearing from each other, and part of it is that we're putting our ideas on paper, and we'll record the answers and then share out just the themes, not the details, like word for word. Of the questions.
We're thinking about a half hour for that, and then we'll come back and capture the themes and whatnot. And I think, are we going to do 4? 4 groups?
I think we should do 4 groups. What do you
Yeah.
guys think? I think 4 would be good because that's
Yes.
maybe about
So,
8 to 10.
yes, Robin.
Just a question about the old LWRP, is it still on the,
You can find it on the Department of State website.
It's on the Department of
And
State.
if you want, we can share that out in the next, because it
Just
is
a
interesting.
comparison.
It's actually really cool to read, and it's got really interesting hand-drawn
I was going to say,
maps.
all the maps are hand-drawn.
And
There's
all the
no-
lettering is hand-done. It's
graphic
really
program.
cute. Yeah, you'd be interested.
So, that's a criticism of me. I came here tonight, I thought tonight was more about what's going to happen, friendship, and the specific waterfront, so maybe I missed something. And I also feel now, like, without much direction, I mean, is this a totally blue sky
Yeah.
about the village, or
It's
is
a
there
blue
more
sky. What do you
specific
love
direction?
about Tivoli? What would you love to see here? What is the thing you want to preserve? What is the thing you want to change? It's a big, lovely, dreamy, put it all down, brainstorm, throw it at the wall.
And I would say it could be
So
as
it can
specific
include all
as like, we should build a waterfront park, it should have kayak put-ins, it should have like a dog park, it should have like on-street parking. Like you could be like super detailed if that's your vision and you already know what that is and you came with it. Or it could just be like, I'm really frustrated that every time I go down this one street, like my side view mirror hits the other car and like we need wider streets. It could be something like that. Do you know what I mean? Like something you might not really know what the solution is, but you're just stating like this is a difficult thing about living in Tivoli right now. Because then we're gonna like take all that stuff and like put it back together, work with planners, whatever, and then we'll come back and say, so a stated goal is to like, whatever, build a sidewalk here or to make this street a scenic road or whatever, so it's protected, right? That kind of thing. So it could be anything really, as detailed or as non-specific as you want.
But just to have the hopes of the village in this official document, as we feel them at this moment together.
And it's okay if it's about your specific road or street or whatever issue, or it can be broader. I think
Doesn't this assist getting planning grants, I mean implementation grants in the future?
Yeah.
So if you wanted to seek funding, if you show you're consistent with your WRP, that helps.
Yeah, so the shoreline stabilization grant we got, the planning grant, the 50,000, and the execution grant, the construction grant, 380. We're like, LWRP, look, that's right here.
And that probably
That
gives
helps.
you extra points.
Yeah, yeah, and it also, just for Jamie, I want to see list. That's like, it can be about, what do we already have that we want to preserve and make sure that, we like walkability, let's not tear out all the sidewalks, or, anything like that, Lisa, did you?
No, good.
No, I was just gonna ask, would it be helpful to know, I mean, I've talked to you, I've bumped into you, and we've talked about, oh, we got a grant for this, we got a grant for that. Should we know those things so we're not saying, well, you know what I'd really like? I'd like a sidewalk, new sidewalk from here to there, when it's already in the pipeline.
It's really okay because that feedback tells us that people don't know. So maybe like the answer is like, we need better communication,
Okay.
right? Or whatever, right? Yeah, so better maps, I don't know. It could be
Yeah,
really
I'd say,
anything, so
go
it's
ahead,
okay.
don't worry if it
Yep.
feels redundant, because you can always use more.
I think Larry had.
Well, it was sort of the same thing. I just wondered about, getting a better sense from you at some point, maybe not this meeting, but something, like what's really realistic, what's the time frame? I mean, I've been hearing about the waterfront park for a long time, and I'm just wondering, are there obstacles that mean it's gonna, no matter how much we want it? That kind of information.
Yeah, I don't think tonight is about, like, go for it, pretend there's no friction in the universe and you could have anything. I think
What is
tonight
that
is
$380,000 grant though?
I'm sorry?
What is that $380,000?
That was, 2 or 3 years ago now, we did that riprap and topsoil and cleaned up the waterfront. That was
Okay.
So the village's parcel that we acquired in 2010 was eroding really badly. So it became apparent that if we don't do an erosion control project, we're not going to be ever having a park down there. So
Okay.
so that's all done, spent, built.
Okay.
Before Donna chimes in, just real quick, so the document that we will create out of all the feedback that we receive over the next 6 months, it's gonna have like a value statement that's sort of like, here are the 9 things that Tivoli values, right? We value, it's probably gonna be somewhat similar to last time, and probably a little different. We value being walkable, we value small, whatever, whatever the things are. So it's gonna have some bigger, broader things, and then it's gonna say out of that, here are the 7 things we hope to see. We hope to see new zoning in this particular area. We hope to see probably a new waterfront park, something, there'll be things. So I hope that's helpful. There will be sections, some of which are just articulating a broad value, some of which we're going to drill down to a more specific project, whatever those are. We don't know what they are yet because we haven't talked to everybody about them. Donna?
So I grew up here and I've been dreaming of a waterfront park for 100 years.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I have some other ideas. Unfortunately, I have to leave, so it's okay if we email Mayor Griffin?
Yeah, just put LWRP in the subject so I can keep it straight.
Okay, okay.
Yeah. And I think,
Just to reassure you, like, people have wanted a waterfront project for a long time. There has been progress, right? It hasn't been like stalled out
Yes.
completely, right? So it's okay if you bring ideas like that and we can at least say, like, we've gotten this far, but help us get the rest of the way, state of New York or whoever can give us money to do that. So I hope that's helpful.
and for Larry, I'll just say, Sarah's questions here, I think, are quite good. I mean, just, when we break out in a group, I think if we've got 12 people in a group and they all go through those 4 questions, we're going to go through 30 minutes pretty fast and come up with a lot of good stuff. They're good, good starting point.
So I think unless there's another specific process question, let's go ahead and break into groups and we'll do them. I think let's have one group each by the 2 zoning maps. So, you can kind of move chairs, but like include the map in your circle so you can look at it. And then we'll give the other groups these maps so they can also look at a map. And we'll just do them in sort of the quadrants of the room.
So there's about 9 people in a group. or
Yeah,
so.
something 9, not more than 10 people for sure in a group.
And in your
8 to 9
group,
people.
someone should be making sure there's no mistakes.
Thank you for doing the brainstorming. That was a lot of the hard work that we wanted to do tonight. And now what we want to do is just really briefly share out some themes from your group. Michelle Gregg has joined us. Hi, Michelle.
Hi, Michelle. Michelle did so much work.
So Michelle's going to take some notes so that the rest of us can all be listening, that we're part of groups. And we're just going to share out some themes, but then if you were the scribe, make sure to leave your paper either with us or make a plan like Lisa and I are to like type up your notes and send them soon, not in 2 weeks, but soon to us. So we capture all the good stuff that came out of the groups. But does somebody want to, should we call this group 1? Does anybody want to share out from group 1?
Sam?
Do you want me to, should I read from our
You have to
gangster?
nominate.
Okay, like how in depth are we going? Are we doing like one, should I?
No, so, yeah, what, Michelle?
Could the presenters stand up
Yeah,
at the front?
Sure,
stand
sure,
up.
sure, sure,
And then
sure.
I think more like maybe share out some themes from each question, or just general, sort of like, what are the things people are loving, what are some things people hope for?
Okay.
You know.
3 minutes.
Come on. What people are loving, the views, the beauty, how environmentally friendly Tivoli is. One thing that came up was not a lot of fencing so that animals move freely, which is wonderful. The connection to Bard and the student energy, how quirky Tivoli is. Things we're not liking, traffic, worried about it, broken sidewalks, the speed. The bus to Bard is much too big and it's messing up people's pipes in their homes. Pine Street's become a thoroughway for trucks and buses, lack of affordable housing. One things we want to work on and hope for, prioritize pedestrians, more trees, signs for the waterfront park that route cars through Claremont and don't come through our village. Continue to help the health of the Hudson River, fish health, just keeping the river clean. Keeping residences tightly clustered so that we can preserve all the green space that we do have. The village website should list all of the committees that are happening because people were learning that there's a tree committee and that there's this committee and an environmental committee, and they were excited. Concerns, the bad concerns for climate change, concerns about the waterfront park. The one idea that came out was the idea of a shared street. I didn't know what that was, but lots of people here maybe do, but it's something everyone should investigate tonight. Maybe Dan Dioka can tell people about it. A notice board for the public, sideways going all the way down to the river, restricting cars on Broadway at certain times, possibly. Nature labeling, I loved that idea. Label our trees, make it educational. A meadow at the water tower, no more mowing there. A dog park, a swim dock, extend the shoreline out into the river, anything that we can do to grab a little more room down there. A water feature in the rec park, maybe near where the old water tower sat, plantings and more trees in the rec park. Okay, I hope I represented us truthfully.
Now, there's like a way you can do a thing where you put like a sticky note on like the ideas, so you can show, like all the different ideas that got a lot of votes, but maybe we'll do that next time.
Well, when we gather these,
Yeah.
we'll
We'll make a
collate
digital
it.
version of that for
Yeah.
sure and share it out, yeah. Who wants to, how about the back? Yeah, Lisa, you wanna, just stand where you are and, if you can.
What we like, it's small, it's walkable, we know our neighbors, it's not on a highway, it's dense, people are near each other, so you could just walk, see everybody there. It's weird, it's good. It's good. There are no chain stores here, it's not Rhinebeck. It's on the river, we're right near state land, and so you can walk out your door and walk on a path. There's no sprawl, we have mountain views, great appreciation for nature. Things that are problems include above ground wires and power failures all the time, and the idea of wanting to bury power, bury the wires underneath. The park is in desperate need of attention, and that it should be a center where everybody can come to. A water feature would help that, someplace that you can come to, and everybody in Tivoli, young, old, you've got kids, you don't have kids, during the day, Tivoli is active on Friday night through the weekend, but during the day, where do you meet each other if you're not at the post office? So a park that was really a place you could come and sit and get your coffee and say, oh, I'll meet you at the park and we'll do that. There were some specific things about the basketball court and lighting and noise problems for people who were, and also related to that, the bathrooms in the park and peeing and noise and people waking up the neighbors. Dog waste stations are needed, better trash disposal. Affordable housing did come up also. We have to think about, are there places that we can find areas that we can build something that will take care of that? Planning for housing, we need to think ahead. We need to not have it be a surprise to us when everything happens, whether it's climate or housing or short-term rental or whatever it is. So there's that. Okay, and the hopes and concerns. Hopes, we want to stay a community. We want to have more Tivolians here. We want to have a real community center, a place that everybody can go to that's not just one particular restaurant or something like that. Concerns, flooding, the bathroom situation, the park, some concern about consolidation of ownership of various properties and that it wants to be spread about more. A couple of other suggestions were a fire tower, something you can look at, or someplace to climb up at the top of Memorial,
You need to build a mountain first.
Well, the little hill on Monument Hill.
Take the vessel in Hudson Park.
So those were some of the things that we had on that one.
Joe, do you want to do this?
No, I want you to do
All
this.
right. Joe gave me lots of themes while we were talking, and he was thinking about the grant he's going to be writing. So what we love, and a lot of this already came up, so I'm just going to say the things that weren't mentioned. Actually, someone mentioned that they love seeing the young men at the rec park playing basketball and making good use of that. The topography in the river, Bard as a cultural asset. That it's an artsy community, that it's authentically historical character, it's authentic historical character. Walkability, that you can just go out and have a beautiful walk. Needs work, there was discussion about the ball field. There was lots of discussion about community center. Third place, the same sort of a thing. There was concern about light pollution, that sometimes the street lamps are just so bright for some people. What did you say? You felt like you were on, what did you say? You felt like you were on 3rd Avenue in New York City. Garbage receptacles, I think someone mentioned that, just for community trash. A new resident manual was suggested because we had a new resident and he wasn't sure of some things. And then Joe calls it environmental stewardship. I wrote down septic systems for those not on the village system, I guess are experiencing some problems. I'm on the system, so I don't know about that. And the riverfront park, in terms of needing work. Hopes and concerns, connectivity to the riverfront through a sidewalk, because we'd have to walk on the street. More for the rec park, people talked about that. Third places, more third places. Affordability. My special favorite was continue the progress with Bard's student population and resident relations. I live next door to the party house. At the end of Montgomery Street. Climate change actions, which somebody in our group mentioned something like a water barrel project for gardens, and I'm sure there are lots of other things. And then, not interesting, was water softening as part of the village system, because people were talking about everybody having their own water softener. Well, okay, building and preserving community, that was the label for the grant, that's the community piece. And then actually, Joe had mentioned just the limits of capacity for us to get things done in a village this size, that people really would need to step up to make some of these things happen, because we don't necessarily have the finances to bring professionals in, or even want to bring professionals in. A project developed a plan for the waterfront. Just have a plan. So what are we going to have down there? Is it going to be 4 picnic tables, or is it just, is it there going to be a dock? What is there going to be? Use of the village crier. Does everybody know what the village crier is? Okay. Joel says he swears that it's updated, but it would be nice if we all knew to go there, because
When you say use, you need people reading what's in there.
What
Yes.
is a village cry?
It's right on the corner of Montgomery and Broadway. What corner is that? I guess it's the, west or east? Southwest. And it's basically a bulletin board behind glass, or a flyer display.
Okay.
It's on the side of Santa Fe.
Side of Santa Fe. Across the street. But there were lots of questions about how do I find out what's going on. And Joel, there is a website, Joel does regular
there's emails, there's social media, but still people are not necessarily getting all that information, so that could be a cool place. Continue improvement on the rec park and just the need for again, just the community space.
What about the toilet program?
Yeah, I didn't mention that.
Could you two just maybe keep it
I
down?
think that's central.
You know, people are-
This is great. It's great to hear all the themes that are in common with our group. So I'll just go through ours really quick. As far as things we love and value, a lot of the same things that people have already mentioned, but I'll mention just the way that people can be longtime residents and new, and somehow it's all working here. So like the inclusivity of Tivoli, and just the weirdness, the way it all is blended. And the ability to know your neighbors, and people talked about like how many people are engaged in some kind of craft or like arts, and like just having a place that feels like that kind of place where you can be engaged in your arts and your crafts and things. The loop, of course, natural views, the access to the river, yeah, just the ability to know everyone if you want to, that it's quiet, depending on your point of view, but and access to wildlife. So those are some things that people loved. As far as missing or needs work, lots of the things people mentioned, affordability, of course, things like access to the river that's safe, that is like good fishing, that kind of thing. The housing in particular for affordability. We need an ATM. That was like a very specific one. Like affordable groceries, that kind of thing. So how do we balance nobody wants a grocery store, but we want our necessities met in the village. So how to do that? What else?
Didn't we have an ATM?
Okay, well,
Yeah,
we used to. Yeah, so affordability and housing were a big one. Okay, and then as far as other concerns, climate change, of course, enforcement of zoning, understanding what the zoning is, so the new resident handbook, that kind of idea. Safety of the 9G intersection was a biggie. Water issues, stormwater, we got into a lot, drainage, flooding. Yeah. And the police thing, just how do we balance, like it feels like there's been improvement in that relationship, community policing, like how do we kind of help keep each other safe? And as far as projects, we all kind of went around and said dog park was one that we also had, no big changes. A project as we don't want to change. I thought that was great.
Put a date on this.
Benches on the loop,
Benches on the loop
cool idea, I think.
for old people,
Stormwater system,
so they can sit down.
waterfront park, and we want to re-envision the whole rec area.
Yeah, I think a lot of people.
So those are some of the things for our.
Yeah.
I left out one. Gentleman did mention that the telephone poles, or somebody else, I didn't know what they were talking about, so I didn't write it down, but that they're in the middle of the street.
Yes,
That's an issue for sure, yeah. Good. So if you have those notes, please either turn them in or type them up soon while they're still in your head, and then send them to the mayor.
LWRP, just.
Yeah, send them to the Tivoli mayor email address, and we'll collate them. So a couple of things as far as next steps. First, stay tuned, because we're going to do that Google form or some way of digitally collecting more ideas. So you can put ideas in there. The more the merrier. You can share it with friends and neighbors and whatever. So we'll put that out. We'll have probably more meetings. We might do a couple smaller stakeholder groups. So if you're a part of a stakeholder group and you think it would be good to meet, you could do that. And then also, we could probably use a couple more volunteers on the committee to help collate these ideas. So if you really enjoyed this and you want to be part of it, I think come talk to Joel or myself or somebody and see if maybe you would want to get involved in the next 6 to 8 months of this.
How often do you meet?
I mean, not that regularly until now is kind of our next big push. So I don't know.
It's
At
kind
least
of as
monthly.
needed,
Yeah.
we send things off to the Department of State and then there's nothing to do for a while.
Okay.
But now we'll
Then it
probably
comes
meet
back
a
and
few
it's busy
times,
time.
yeah, monthly or more, depending, yeah.
And I would like to definitely thank our committee and Sarah.
I just want to say that this report that you just put out, this draft report, I guess, it's a draft. I just wanted to say it's one of the best reports of this kind that I've ever read anywhere. I've read over 1,000 reports. recommend that everybody read it. I hope you'll publicize it as something more than just, when the title is not very exciting.
Right.
But it's all beyond.
We'll come up with a more exciting title, and
It's
that's
really
mainly
worth thinking
Sam
about
and
putting
Michelle
something like that
are
out.
the main authors, so,
It's really
yeah,
good.
great writing.
And I also want especially to thank Tivolians for coming. I mean, it was really cute when Sarah and I were trying to impose order on 25 Tivolians talking about Tivoli. We couldn't do it.
Yeah.
They wouldn't stop talking about this village, which, we know that we all love very much and care enough about to think about how we can improve it. And it is what it is because of all of us. So please also, in the coming months, tell your friends and neighbors and your family and get this through the rest of the village so that everyone feels that they've been a part of this process. That's important to us. So we need your help on that.
The one other thing would be, a few people have asked, like, specifically, what if I propose something that, like, now I'm worried, now I'm suddenly thinking about the insurance liability or whatever. This isn't the time to worry about that. What we're gonna do is kind of like collate all the ideas and figure out how to represent it in a way that makes sense and, fits with the document and represents like the views of the whole community. And really the job going forward, once it's all approved, that's for later, like whether certain things are doable, like, and somebody else had a question about like, well, what if I want this done in 5 years, hopefully not 30? We gotta cast a vision ahead, right? Because we can't be doing this like every 2 years, but some of that is just, it's a down the road question. Right now, it's just important to get the vision and the ideas. So don't be limited by what you think is possible.
And as a parting treat, the reason the telephone poles are in the road, they didn't used to be. So there used to be a 2-foot wide, vegetative strip all along, and the poles were in that. And at some point, previous administration found money, paved Montgomery Street, and they paved that over. So it's really the road's fault. The road came over the poles. They're in the road, but anyway, that's what happened.
Wow.
So there's an example of, I'm sure someone had the best intentions and was thrilled that they were able to pave Montgomery Street and it needed it, but, one little detail, and now this is this big thing in the village, everyone's like, okay.
So in the Google form, everybody, let's all agree we're gonna put like restore the vegetative strip. Right? My agreement.
And I'll just, this process for me is really interesting, and I read a lot of stuff, philosophy all day long to prepare myself, because, it's great that we can do this dreaming, imagining, really just go for it, and then we codify that, and at some point it does, rubber hits the road, right? How do you translate all this stuff into reality? And it's fascinating for me to sit here and not, in our group, almost everything, I'm like, well, this is why there aren't trash receptacles, or whatever. So it's kind of fun for me to not have to worry about that stuff in this role, and I know Bill Schilling's here somewhere too. So let's get a good LWRP done so that future boards of trustees have an easier time maybe.
Thank you all
Thanks
so
for
much.